Good morning, class. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the great Greek philosopher Plato. And of course, most of you have probably heard of his name. If there are any philosophers that people generally hear about, even before they take a philosophy class, it's Socrates, Plato, perhaps Aristotle. Anyway, so he's considered one of the great three Greek philosophers, Socrates being the first one. Socrates was Plato's tutor, and then Plato, of course, comes into the mix, and then followed by Aristotle. Their three names spell the words. They're the first initials of their names: S, Socrates; P, Plato; Aristotle; A. It spells spa, and so S-P-A, spa, like a day spa. And that's kind of one way that you can kind of remember their historical chronology. But anyway, let's get into the thought a little bit about Plato. For Plato, there are two realities, two worlds, if you can think about it that way. So there's this physical world that you and I are all in, the physical world of colors. You can see a beige kind of color in this room. There's light coming in from the sun into this room. There's this pair of glasses. There's these physical attributes that you see of your teacher's face, my voice. There's the physical world. I'm knocking on this desk. You can kind of hear the physical attribute of wood. So we all understand the physical world that we're in. That's the world of matter, the world of becoming, being this Greek expression of the evolution of things. So a tree grows and it becomes a tree, it dies, it burns, it gets root rot, it dies. Another tree comes into being. Same thing with people, same thing with cloud formations, the weather, everything is changing. That's kind of like what Heraclitus noticed. All is change. All is changed, governed by this idea of this intelligence called the divine logos. So all things are changing. I mentioned that in a previous video about the not the earthquake, but the volcano that occurred in Mount St. Helens back in the 1980s. So everything is changing. The volcano produced this tremendous chaos. But then out of that chaos came a new forest. That's Heraclitus's view, the world of becoming. A couple of days ago, if you were listening to that lecture on Parmenides, he kind of denied all of that change and said that the world doesn't really change. It's nothing but an illusion. An illusion. Even though we seem to perceive change, it's an illusion because something cannot come from nothing. And I'm not going to go into that big argument with you right now. Anyway, so here we are a couple of decades later with the thought of Plato. And so for Plato, there's this world of becoming, the world of matter, the world of change, weather change, season change, bodily change, historical change. Okay, but then there's a separate reality that he talks about too, which is the world of being, not the world of becoming, but the world of being. And that's a world that we can't really see with our senses. We can intuit that it exists, but we can't really perceive it. So why would Plato come up with this theory of a world or a reality that we can't really see? We can intuit it, we kind of sense that it exists, but we can't really perceive it. Why did he come up with such a theory? And I'm going to offer you a way of thinking about his theory that will help you kind of understand why he developed this world of the forms, or this world of being, this separate world apart from the world of matter. I should add that in the world of matter, the typical characteristics of this world of matter, the world of becoming, it's that it's imperfect, it's changing, and it's temporary. Everything here is going to eventually die and evolve into another shape. So it's temporary, imperfect, and changing. Okay, now into the world of being. How did he come up with this world of being? This world of being. Aren't we in the world of being? Yes. But Plato uses the word being to specifically refer to this world of the forms, this secondary world. Okay, so don't get lost. You'll be able to see what I'm saying in a minute or two. So how did he come up with this secondary world that we don't really see with our senses? How did he come up with it? So here's an idea for you. If you can kind of consider the mathematician, great geometrician, Pythagoras, who came up with the Pythagorean theorem that you might have learned about in the 8th or ninth or 10th grade, whenever you took geometry. And you've learned that a squared plus b squared equals c squared. It's a way for us to find the hypotenuse of a right triangle. And I'll draw, or I'll upload some images so you can see what I'm talking about the hypotenuse. And it's basically a geometrical proof for solving the length of the hypotenuse, the opposite line from a right triangle. So if I'm sounding a little bit wonky here, just to let me develop the idea. So for Pythagoras, imagine, let's do a little thought experiment. So imagine the night before Pythagoras published his theorem. Let's say the night before, he hadn't published it yet. It's the night before. I'm going to ask you a question. Was that theorem already true the night before? And I'm hoping that you'll answer that question with the answer yes, because even though Pythagoras hadn't really written it out the following morning, that theorem was already intellectually, mathematically true even before it was published. And let me push this idea of that a little bit further. If it's true the night before, if that theory was actually intellectually and mathematically true the night before Pythagoras published it, was it true a week before he published it? This is 7 days before he published his theorem. Was it true that day? And if the answer to that question is yes, let me push the idea a little bit further. Was it true a month before? And if the answer to that is yes, I'll push. Was it true a year before? Was it true 10 years before? Was it true 100 years before? Was it true 1,000 years before? In other words, even before the time of Pythagoras, was that theorem already intellectually true, even though it hadn't come into the world of matter? Nobody had ever written it or discovered it or published it. But it was already intellectually true when you simply think about the theory or the properties of triangles or squares or circles. All of those geometrical things that you learn, theorems that you learn in geometry, were already true before Pythagoras, before Euclid, before any of the great Greek theometricians or geometricians. These concepts were already mathematically true, conceptually true, before they appeared into the world of matter. And as a matter of fact, for Plato, these mathematical proofs are eternally true, even if no human being had ever come into existence. Now that's a really weird theory to get your brain behind. In other words, for Plato, there are things that are intellectually true, even if no human being would have discovered them. So let me push this analogy a little bit further. Let's imagine that there are future mathematical equations that haven't been produced yet, that haven't been discovered yet, about physics or about quantum mechanics or about some deep mathematical existence, about dark matter or something in the universe that some Einstein or some Stephen Hawking hasn't even developed yet, hasn't even come up with a theory yet. But let's imagine some equations haven't even been developed yet. But let's say that they're already true, even though they haven't been published yet. For Plato, there are things that have the quality of truth or being even before they come into the world of matter. And even if no human being ever would think of some theoretical proof, some scientific discovery, that discovery would still be true for Plato eternally. Eternally, meaning theories can be true for Plato even independent of human thinking. They just simply are true. Now, where are they true? In whose mind do they exist? Plato doesn't really solve that question for us. He doesn't really solve that question for us. Like, in other words, where are these truths supposed to exist if they don't exist in a human mind, either from the past or from going into the future? Where do these truths exist? And Plato doesn't really answer that question. So some people conceptualize, well, they exist in the mind of God. But you haven't really proved the existence of God. So where do they exist? Plato doesn't really answer the question. He just thinks that there are things that are true and they exist separately from human reality, even before they're discovered, and even things that are in the future that haven't been discovered. So if you can think about all the theories, mathematical theories, scientific discoveries, electronic discoveries, perhaps the possibility of traveling into the future, wormholes, separate realities, parallel universes, multiverses. Let's say we haven't really discovered these things. We kind of conceptualize these things theoretically, but for Plato, there are things that exist that the human mind hasn't even conceived yet. And that's what he refers to as the world of being. And this world is perfect, it's eternal and unchanging. The world of matter that you and I live in is imperfect, it's temporary, and it's changing. We're all getting older, time is moving on. Your baby picture doesn't look like your driver's license picture. And the way you look at your high school reunion 10 years from now is not going to be the way that you look, right now. So we are in the world of becoming. But Plato is referring to the world of being, this other world that we can perceive that it exists, but we can't really see it with our eyes. We can only perceive it intellectually. And for Plato, this world is perfect, it's eternal, and it's unchanging. Now, what exists in that world? Obviously, mathematical concepts, geometrical concepts, equations, formulas, theories, future discoveries. All of those things exist in the world of the intellectual forms. He also called that world of being. I keep using this expression and maybe I should clarify it. He calls the world of being, this intellectual world, the world of the forms, or the world of ideas. That's the world of being that Plato is referring to, this second world. So what else exists in that world? Only mathematical conceptions? No, as a matter of fact, there are other concepts that exist in the world of the forms. Concepts such as love, concepts such as beauty, concepts such as truth or goodness. Now you might be thinking, well, I kind of like the idea that mathematical concepts have a separate pre-existing intellectual reality. I mean, many people can wrap their brains around intellectual concepts having truth, independent of human beings ever discovering them. Many people like Plato on the mathematical side of this separate world existence. Many people like Plato on that. There's probably current mathematicians who think that mathematics has a separate intellectual existence, even people living today. But when you start thinking like Plato thinks, that there are other realities in this world of forms or in this world of being besides mathematics, like I said, things like goodness, things like love, things like truth, things like beauty or justice. So let me explain that idea with you a little bit, and I'll give you a couple other ideas about the world of the forms. Now, think about the world of love for existence. Okay, the idea of love for existence. Now, think about the human reality of love as we experience on planet Earth, human beings with our experiences of love. I'm going to show you an idea here. Okay, so here's my cell phone here. Now, have you ever been in the in love stage with somebody when you're really infatuated? You send them a text during class, like before COVID. You send somebody a text. You go, okay, now excuse me if I act in a little bit of a play acting here a little bit. So you send a text to somebody that you're really enthralled with. You're in the in love stage, and you say, "Hey, baby, where you at? Holler." And then you're waiting. Even during class, you're kind of thinking she'll call. I'm using male, female. Okay, so anyway. Forgive your professor for limited imagination. Anyway, so you're waiting for a text back because the typical thing is you send a text, somebody else sends the text right back to you. But 5 minutes later, 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, the entire class goes by and you don't get that little dopamine rush back. They don't call. So then after class, let's say the class got out at noon and you're going, "Hey, baby, where you at? Where are you?" And you still don't get any text, and then you kind of go, "Man, I don't know if you guys have ever done this," but then you start filling in the blanks for the person that's not texting you back. You start thinking, "Well, I know she doesn't work today. I know she doesn't pick up her little baby brother. She's not babysitting. It's Tuesday. She doesn't work today. Where is she?" So you might send another text, "Hey, baby, where you at?" Exclamation point, exclamation point. Check in, baby. And she doesn't. Evening comes, and now you're tripping because you're going, "Man, this feels weird." Now your mind is playing with you a little bit. And into the evening, it's 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, midnight. You're still looking at your phone, and you're going, "Man, where was that text back?" And you're getting a little resentful. You shouldn't be. Remember, you've told her in your poems, "I love you, baby. The sun rises and sets on you. Your beauty is unmatched. Helen of Troy doesn't hold a candle to your beauty. Aphrodite, she wasn't nothing compared to you. I mean, you're all poetic and stuff, but here you are at midnight, 1 o'clock, like a little wounded schoolboy like you are, and you go, "Where is that call? How come you didn't call me?" But you go to bed. The next morning when you're at class again, your phone starts blowing up. Oh, and it's her. And she's saying, "Oh, baby, I had such a crazy day yesterday. I'll get you caught up. Love you." And you get that message the next morning after going through the day that you went through the day before, and you go, delete. And she texts you an hour later, "Baby, where you at? Love you. Can't wait to see you." And you go, delete. And all day long. And you want to break down, right? When she texts you the third time and the fourth time, and it's already getting into the afternoon. "Hey, baby, are you tripping? What's up, man?" Whatever she's saying to you and stuff like that, she's trying to get you to respond, but you're kind of going, "Nah, I got my pride issues. I got my pride issues. If you sweated me for 24 hours, I believe in equal opportunity. I'm going to sweat you for 24 hours." And so evening comes and she's going, "Baby, where you at? Love you, thinking about you. Why don't you call? Why don't you text?" And you go, you hold your guns, you don't break in, you don't cave, and you don't call, you don't text the rest of the evening. The next day, you send her a text using exactly the same words that she used the day before. "Oh, baby, you should have seen the day I had. It was just crazy." And when she gets that text, she goes, "Asshole." Because she knows that you're sending her some kind of really weird message about how resentful and how angry and how hurt you were by not hearing from her. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, if any of you, I'm going to have to, my phone goes off, right, and it's like an 800 number of a call that I was waiting back from a tech support. Oh my God, I can't pick up that call. And I'm going to go, "Well, we called you." Anyway, now human love. Do any of you kind of like respond to this little BS notion of human love that I'm talking about, that we're easily hurt, We're easily abandoned. We're easily resentful. Not all of you. Some of you got your stuff together and you're healthy and you can take little disappointments and ride it like the wind. Yeah, but there's other people, they got issues. They got abandonment issues. They got attachment issues. And things like this can hurt them. And so you get resentful. And your love is more like a roller coaster. It's high one time and then it's really low some other time. And you're going, that's human love. I mean, now, but is that the only image of love that really, the first image of love that I was sharing with you is very immature, it's very juvenile, it's very infatuated and susceptible to all kinds of mood changes. That first image of love that I just shared with you about the phone. But there's other people who really love you independent of all that BS. They love you like your parents, the way they might love you, the way they give you, and they just keep working for you and helping you and providing you with guidance and just steady love, even when you act selfishly and you're self-absorbed and you're moody and you're going through all your changes, and even when you don't help out with family expenses, they still love you. So we have some experiences on planet Earth of real sublime love in which people, even when they're hurt, they stay with you and they don't abandon you. I'm thinking, for instance, there's a story, the dude who played the role of Superman back in the late 80s and 90s, Christopher Reeve. I'll show you a picture of Christopher Reeve. The Superman is kind of flying through the air with his cape. And the actor, Christopher Reeves, who played Superman, was thrown off a horse, and he went forward off the horse, hit his head, the head kind of compressed down onto his vertebrae, and he was almost completely a quadriplegic, completely paralyzed in his hands, his feet. He couldn't even blink. His spinal cord injury was so significant that he could not even blink his eyes. People had to come along every couple of hours or whatever and give ointment drops into his eyes to keep his eyes lubricated because he didn't even have the ability to blink. He had every couple of hours he had to have a tube inserted into him so he could urinate. He had to be given like laxatives to be able to pass his food through his bowels. In other words, his body couldn't even do the basic things, the reflexes. If you kind of punch somebody or you act like, people go, they'd have reflexes. He couldn't do that. He didn't even have that. And as a matter of fact, he couldn't even breathe on his own. The little chair that he was sitting in, this little locomotive chair that he had, that provided a breathing apparatus into his throat so that he could breathe. It would suck air down into his lungs so that he could breathe. He was that spinal cord damaged that he couldn't even breathe. And his wife, I think his wife was Dana, but I'll show you in the corrected version when I upload some graphics onto this film that you're watching, never abandoned him. Here she was, beautiful, still very young, attractive. She could have remarried. She could have divorced and left him because he was no longer the vibrant actor that he was. He couldn't do anything except sit in a wheelchair. Now, Christopher Reeves always held out the hope that science would eventually come up with the technology, maybe stem cell technology, that would help him to walk again. And he held on to that belief in his wheelchair that one day he would walk again. He went on Oprah. He was doing national talks and stuff about, his wife and him were kind of celebrities for dealing with this tragedy and never blinking. But I'm focusing in on his wife, who absolutely stayed by his side up until the moment that he died, never abandoned him. And I don't know about you, but that's an image of love way different than the kind of love you or I might have when we're going through. She loves me, but maybe she doesn't. I love him, maybe I don't. All that little BS stuff that we go through in romantic love. But there are some people that really love and do amazingly heroic things. Single mothers raising all kinds of kids. You hear about stories like this. Mothers or fathers doing single fathers, or people in war-torn countries trying to find their children when they've been separated. Incredible stories of love. We hear about these things. And then you think, maybe Plato is referring not to human love, but to the form of love. I hope I don't lose you there, because down here on earth, we have all kinds of forms of love, from very weak romantic infatuation love But some of us really elevate our love game and do heroic things, and we stay in love with our partners, or we stay in love with our family, and we do heroic things for our family. Some of you have to work and support your family. So you already know that some of you are required by your family dynamics to give of yourself and to be loving towards your family, to your brothers and sisters. Some of you already are showing deep signs of love. But notice, there's even a higher form of love that could exist, that human beings may get close to in the people like Gandhi or Buddha or Jesus of Nazareth or Muhammad, or people that we know, Teresa of Calcutta. You know, there's great saints from every religious tradition on the planet who are very, very loving and transcend this weak notion of love, and they really take us to this high sublime notion of love. And that's what Socrates, excuse me, that's what Plato is pointing up to, not to this version of love, this material version of love, but to the ideal form of love, which he believes exists in this world of being, or in this world of form. Along with mathematics, there's this idea of not human love, but of the perfection of love. And we could do that same concept with justice, the concept of justice. The concept of justice exists here on earth. Of course, we have the concept of justice here on earth, to render to others that which is due. That's the famous philosophical definition of justice, to render to others what is due. And what is due to you, if you get a good grade or have earned a good grade, is an A. In justice, I would be a just professor if I gave you what is earned, what you've earned. That's justice, to give what is earned, to give what is due. Sometimes what is due to us is punishment, and that's also justice, because that's what is due to you, because you're a narco trafficker or something like that. You've killed people, you murder people. You're Escobar down in Colombia. Or some other person that's very, very notorious. So justice is what is due to you. But even though there's this earthly concept of justice, you and I know that the earthly concept of justice is full of plea bargains and, copping a plea, and the lawyers looking for the best deal, where you give certain evidence against somebody in a conspiracy, and then you'll get immunity. And you always hear about stuff like this. How did that dude who's a damn criminal get immunity just by testifying and throwing somebody else under the bus? They should all get prison time. Nobody should be allowed to walk. But you always hear about it in movies. Some of you have studied, the criminal justice system or law. You know that the legal system that we have is full of all kinds of weird little gray areas, and you go, that doesn't sound like justice. And that's exactly what Plato would say too. The earthly form of justice is not the divine or the eternal form of justice that exists intellectually in the world of forms, in the world of being. Are you kind of seeing that there's this earthly reality that we have, but then for Plato, there's this intellectual, separate reality that we can intuit in our minds, where certain perfect concepts exist, like mathematics, but also even philosophical concepts can exist. Like I said, what was the first one I was talking about? Love or justice. And he would say the same thing with beauty. There's physical beauty, but then there's this spiritual sense of beauty where somebody may not have physical beauty, but they have incredible beauty in terms of who they are as a person. Some little old lady who feeds cats in your neighborhood, she looks like a little, bag lady, but she's incredibly beautiful about how she takes care of her plants and how she takes care of the animals and the birds in her little property. And she might have a sense of beauty that you and I can't see, but it's approaching her beauty approaches what Plato was talking about as the ideal form of beauty, not physical beauty, but the ideal form of beauty. And so Plato believes that all of these things exist in the world of being, in this perfect world of the forms. And so, you kind of think that's why Plato is pictured in this very famous painting of him from the Renaissance by Raphael. It's in the Vatican. I've actually seen this painting when I went to St. Peter's. Behind St. Peter's is the Vatican Museum. And there's this beautiful, I don't know, maybe 5x4 painting, kind of rectangular painting of the School of Athens and Plato. And I'll show you, that image I've showed you already of Plato when he's pointing up to the sky. And where is he pointing? Why did Raphael paint him this way? Because he's pointing him up. He's pointing his finger up to this idea world, the ideal world of forms. And also within those ideal world of forms are other things like computer mouses. This computer mouse that I have right here on my desk existed as an idea even before it existed in the 1990s or whenever mouses came into existence. Plato believes that this electronic device already existed as a perfect idea before somebody from Microsoft or Dell Corporation or whoever invented the mouse. Even before it was conceived, it existed as an idea. This computer keyboard existed as an idea even before it came into existence. This chair that I'm sitting on already was in existence as an idea. I'm not saying in physical existence, even when human beings were sitting on log stumps or on rocks, sitting in caves, the idea of a chair with legs and a back already existed as an idea in the world of forms. So are you getting the idea here that in this separate world of forms are many things, not just intellectual, not just mathematical concepts, but even philosophical concepts, the pure form of intellectual philosophical concept, the purest form, not the earthly form of justice, the pure form of justice. And then there's other things in the world of forms, like the idea of technologies that always have existed even before we had electronics. Plato would say this was already a perfect form. The idea of human, eyes and nose and these features of human, even when human beings had not even evolved yet, in terms of the theory of evolution, even when we were still kind of ape-like on the plains of the African Serengeti, even when human beings were kind of in a hominid shape, the idea of Homo sapiens sapien already existed as a form, male-female. There were already forms of male-female, and even of hermaphrodites and stuff, the perfect form of a hermaphrodite, those also existed. And so anything that comes into being, whether it's an intellectual thing or even a physical thing like a rock or a tree, all of these things have an intellectual being in the world of forms, even before they come into existence in Earth time. Isn't that weird? In other words, the ideas of volcanoes and clouds and mathematics and human beings, all of those things exist. I got to close my window here because I got a neighbor using an air compressor next door. Anyway, so I'm going to cut this video short in just a second because you're listening to videos all day. I feel so bad. I don't know what else to do. I mean, we've got to turn an hour and a half lecture time into, video time or, online time. And so you're probably just sitting there listening to video after video. Anyway, Plato was kind of weird. If you just read about him in the book, in the Palmer book, you'll kind of think, man, I don't get this guy. The theory of the line, the simile of the line, the allegory of the cave, all of those things. Just keep in mind, the allegory of the cave is Plato kind of giving us this little idea that you and I don't see things. We see the shadows of things. We think we see love. We think we see justice. We think we see truth, but we only see dimly. We only see like in a dark, shadowy cave what beauty and trust and truth and all of these things. We don't really see things clearly. That's why in his book, The Republic, he puts that beautiful little three or four page story, The Allegory of the Cave, because Plato is trying to illustrate the idea that we're in the world of matter and we don't really see the world of forms. We don't really see things the way they are. That's why politicians and corporations and propaganda can fool people. QAnon basically can, fool the masses so easily because we don't see things clearly because there's so much clouds and shadows over our eyes that don't allow us to see the truth as it is.